Thank you for watching this video from Kingsway Soft. Today, I will be introducing the SSIS Integration Toolkit for Xero. The Xero Toolkit is a high-performance data integration solution that works for Xero.com, utilizing Microsoft SQL Server Integration Services capabilities. In today's demo, we will show you our software running in a SQL Server 2012 environment. If you are using a different SQL Server version, the interface might be slightly different. To get started, let's create a simple SSIS project. This tutorial assumes that you already have the SSIS bits installed. Otherwise, you will not see the SSIS project type here. In the Business Intelligence template, select the Integration Services project and give your project a name. Press OK to create the solution. Before we can connect to Xero through a third-party tool like ours, we must first create a public-private key pair as well as a private application. For more details on this process, please refer to our help manual on the website. It has outlined all steps needed with useful visual guides. SSIS is a platform that can be used to implement data migration and integration using its drag-and-drop capabilities. To begin the SSIS implementation using our toolkit, we will create a connection to the Xero.com server. To do so, right-click in the Connection Manager area and select New Connection. Then we will choose Xero from the list and select Add. First, we need to fill out our authentication credentials. Your consumer key can be found in the Xero Developer Console underneath My Applications. The path to PFX file is the location of the public-private key file previously mentioned. If there was a password when you generated the public-private key file, you can enter it here. If no password was used, you can choose to leave this field blank. The timeout option lets you specify the maximum number of seconds that the Connection Manager will wait while trying to connect with Xero. This option is defaulted to 120 seconds. Based on the Xero throttle limits, the API throttling rate is defaulted to 60 requests per minute. If it exceeds this amount, the Xero server may stop your request for a short while. Note that Xero has a default daily API quota of 1,000 API calls. In the Advanced Settings tab, we also have proxy server connection settings, which you can enter if you are behind a proxy server. There is also an option for retry intermittent errors. This option is intended to help recover from possible intermittent outages or disruption of service, so that the integration does not have to be stopped due to temporary networking issues. We have designed this option so it should only retry when it's deemed to be safe to do so, but there may be exceptions. Before we hit OK, we should test the connection to make sure our information is correct and we can connect successfully. Please note that the Connection Manager that we just created is a package-level Connection Manager. For SSIS 2012 or later, you can create project-level Connection Managers if you right-click the Connection Managers node within the Solution Explorer. After creating the Xero Connection Manager, you would start to create data flow tasks to facilitate data integration. Within your data flow task, we offer two data flow components that would help you to implement integration solutions for Xero. The first component we are discussing is the Xero source component, which is what you can use to read or retrieve data from Xero. Later on in this demo, we will show you the destination component, which is what you may use to write data into Xero. In order to use these two components, you would want to make sure they are available in the SSIS toolbox. If you are using SQL Server Integration Services 2012 or later, those two components should automatically show up. If this is not the case, you can click the SSIS toolbox. Note that if you're using SSIS 2008 R2 or earlier, you would need to manually add these components to the SSIS Data Flow toolbox. To use the Xero source component, we can simply drag this component to the design surface of the data flow task. Double-click to configure the component. Let's select the Xero Connection Manager. The Source Object option allows us to specify the objects we would like to read data from. When the source object specified has one or more readable child objects, the Child Objects option is enabled. Let's choose some child objects here. Later in the columns page, there will be a secondary output for each child object selected. We will show how to manage the fields for the primary and child objects within the columns page shortly. The where statement option is a text box for conditional statements to be used for data filtering. Notice that we have a refresh component button to refresh the component to the latest Xero metadata. This retrieves and updates the latest metadata in each applicable field. We can now navigate to the columns page to configure what fields we are reading from Xero. This will show you all available fields from the object specified from the general page. Here you will notice that by default, all of the Xero fields are selected. This may not be the best practice. You should only select the fields that you would need to use in the downstream pipeline components. As mentioned before, if any child objects were selected, the drop-down menu on the top of this page will have a list of all secondary outputs. It's important to note that every child object will have a special field representing the ID of its parent object. This field name is made up of the name of the source object and the name of the source object's ID field separated by a period. This field is crucial in managing child objects when reading and writing data. Click OK to finish configuring the source component. For this demonstration, we're going to add dummy data reader destination components for the purpose of showing you how the data flows from the source to destination components. We will now execute this data flow task. Next, we'll create a new data flow task to demonstrate the Xero destination component. As mentioned before, this destination component can be used to write data to Xero. For my source data, I will use data spawner components to quickly generate sample data to work with. The data spawner component is part of the SSIS Productivity Pack, which is a collection of premium SSIS components to enable greater developer productivity. Let's create our first input with some sample contact information. Now we can create our second input with some sample address information. If multiple inputs or child objects are supplied, you need to ensure that the input data is sorted. Now let's drag the Xero destination component and connect to the upstream data flow components. Double-click to open its editor form. On the General page, let's start by selecting a Xero Connection Manager. The destination object is a drop-down list of the supported objects you can write to. This component currently offers 3 write actions: create, update, and delete. Note that certain actions may be disabled depending on the destination object selected. I will quickly switch to contact as my destination object for today's example. For this specific destination object, only 2 actions are available: create and update. The batch size option allows us to specify how many records to send per service call to Xero. This is defaulted to 100. Note that the batch size option is only available for some options. It will be disabled when it is not available for other objects. Next, we have child object settings. In order to have access to child object input data, it is required to map secondary inputs to destination child objects using this table. This table is only visible when the destination object contains child objects that you can write to. The secondary input column will list all the attached secondary inputs. The child object column shows drop-down list of destination child objects. Similar to the source component, the destination component also has a refresh component button to refresh the component to the latest Xero metadata. This retrieves and updates the latest metadata in each applicable field. Next, we can navigate to the columns page, where we map the columns from the upstream components to the Xero destination fields. As you can see, some mapping has already been done for us based on the name match. The last page is the error handling page, where there are 3 error handling mechanisms to choose from. The default option is fail and error, where the entire data flow will fail as soon as an error occurs. There is also the redirect rows to error output, where the error output will contain the failed records with extra columns: error code, error column, and error message. The ignore error option is generally not recommended, as the component will stay silent for any errors that happen. There's also the enable columns for default output section, which you can use to enable or disable the additional column in the destination component's default output. The Xero record ID contains the ID of the Xero item. Press OK to finish configuring this destination component. We can now execute this data flow task. This concludes the demonstration of our SSIS Integration Toolkit for Xero. Thank you for watching this video. For any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us.